Hello everyone. In today's Ignite presentation, I will be talking about common misconceptions in bilingual education. Bilingual education is typically misunderstood, so this presentation will hopefully provide awareness of the topic. Bilingual education is an important aspect of our society, but is constantly interpreted incorrectly, which creates a negative ideology regarding its effectiveness. Bilingual education refers to education in more than one language. Also, the main goal of bilingual education is to provide a meaningful and equitable education of two languages while ensuring an understanding for tolerance and appreciation of diversity. This presentation will focus on three common misconceptions regarding bilingual education with a connection to the history of bilingual education. First, let's begin talking a little bit about the history of bilingual education. As immigrant families were arriving in the United States, the need for change in the school system was evident, but it was not until 1968 when the first official federal recognition of bilingual education was established in the Bilingual Education Act of 1968. In 1972, the next important event was the case of Lau versus Nicholas. This case resulted in the requirement of public school districts to take affirmative steps to rectify English language deficiencies. Later on, multiple reauthorizations or changes of the Bilingual Education Act were placed, which added flexibility in implementation, included provisions for fundings, and specifically mentions the length of student participation in any bilingual program. Even though most of the events tried to create a just and equal society for emergent bilingual learners, the inability to better interpret bilingual education correctly created common misconceptions that exist today. One of the main misconceptions in bilingual education is that learning English is considered bilingual education. As mentioned before, bilingual education is defined as the education in more than one language. Learning only one language does not agree with this definition. As we saw in the history, the major goal of the United States was to create an effective English language students. Many federal legislations were created but focused on the acquisition of the English language rather than multiple languages. Also, many monolingual programs were mistaken as bilingual programs because they were created for students who were English language learners. These programs included submersion with ESL pullout, and structured immersion. Bilingual programs such as traditional bilingual education, developmental bilingual education, and two-way immersion programs exist that satisfy the definition of bilingual education, but are not used in most states. The second misconception is that bilingual education interferes with English language acquisition. Many professionals assume that switching language will result in academic failure. I remember that my parents used to avoid me when I was young because my teacher told them that their language was affecting my learning. In reality, these actions harm the student's language. Bilingual education does not negatively affect the student's cognitive development. Also, there is no research evidence that suggests that the usage of many languages interferes with the target language. Rather, the neglect of using multiple languages affects the motivation to learn the target language. Which makes sense. A student who is being deprived of their native language might begin to hate the target language. Lastly, it is also important to consider that children possess the natural ability to process bilingual input and to differentiate two languages. So, students do not get confused when learning both languages. The final misconception is the idea that the English language does not affect other minority languages. The English language is a very powerful language because of its structural power, resources, and social advantage. As a result, many of the small languages are disappearing. In the classroom, we can see that this is evident because the English language is necessary in this specific society, while other minority languages are not. In the United States, if you know the English language, you can practically solve any problem that may arise, but if you don't, you will end up constantly asking for help. Understanding the power that the English language possesses is important to better support your students. In conclusion, understanding the common misconceptions of bilingual education will help you better support your future students. Remember that the goal of bilingual education is to provide a meaningful and equitable education of two languages while ensuring an understanding for tolerance and appreciation of diversity. I'll end with this quote by Frank Smith that states, "One language sets you in a corridor for life. Two languages open all the doors along the way." Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed.